and processed food. We used to bite and chew. So this is like, how we evolved eating or finding food. And then slowly what happened was we started to settle in places which was giving us a lot of resources. And then like we started to grow our own food. So instead of eating what it was available, so we started to determine, or we started to choose what to grow and what to eat. So that itself is a major shift in our food system. And also if you look at from the energy expenditure point of view, so we started to settle in one place. So the amount of energy that we spend for acquiring food initially is now nil, almost close to nil. So we don't run that much. So we used to farm. Farming is also an activity, like it's also like, I agree that there is an energy expenditure, but not like before. So this is how we slowly evolved. And as we evolved, that is our metabolic activity or metabolism, there were also changes in the food. So we started cooking the food. We started like different principles to store the food. So it's no longer biting and tearing and eating and chewing. It's more of gulping and swallowing as of today. So with this context in place, so I would like to take an example, which is like FADS1. There's one gene, FADS1 gene, which is fatty acid desaturase, because I want to give answers to the questions that I posted in the previous slide. So we spoke about like fats, and we spoke about which fat is good for health or which is bad. So this gene is actually responsible for converting your short chain fatty acids into longer chain fatty acids in humans. And what happens is that based on the conversion efficiencies, we could classify individuals into people who are poor converters, that is people who are carrying certain type of genetic polymorphism, that is C allele. So alleles are nothing but different forms of or different versions of genes. So, and they could be actually categorized as poor converters and excellent converters based on the genetic makeup, to be simply put. And you could see that across the world, you could see that within the American region, so you could see a lot of poor converters, that is C allele carriers. So they are nothing but, you could see how the evolution has transformed our food systems. So if you look at the Americans, you could find that there are a lot of people who are poor converters. And if you look at Asians, especially Indians, you could find a lot of people who are excellent converters. So what happens now is you could find there is a difference across the regions in the world, as well as difference in the frequency of distribution of those two categories, which we have categorized based on the genetic makeup. So Americans are more of poor converter types, whereas Asians, so they are excellent converters. That is, they have more of the population frequency. They have more of excellent converters. Whereas East Asia, you could have like a mixed, or Oceania and Australian region, you can have like equal distribution. So if you look at taking the guidelines, or if we are adapting from other region, other ethnicity, it need not be always true for our ethnicity. So when it comes to genetic, ethnicity plays a very important role. So it differs among ethnicity. So we have to be really looking at ethnicity or population before taking or giving some dietary guidelines. And I can guess, make a very logical and research-based evidence guess that why Americans, they seem to be a lot of poor converters in the American region, whereas like there are more of excellent converters. So the Pima Indians who settled in America, initially they're all hunter-gatherers and descendants from that community. So they didn't have any necessity to convert the plant-based or short-chain fatty acids into long-chain fatty acids. And that could be one of the possible reasons why they are poor converters. So they didn't have any necessity because the meat has long-chain fatty acids which are readily consumed or which are readily available for metabolism. So that could be one of the reasons why in Americas you have more of poor converters or C allele converters, whereas in the Asian region, even today, Indians, majority of the Indians are vegetarian, where we have plant-based diets. And people would have actually converted their fatty acids that they acquired from plant-based fats to animal-based fats, and that could have given them the advantage today to consume more of plant-based diets, because they're very efficient in converting the fatty acids which they get from plant-based diets to convert it into animal-based diets. So if you get from plant sources oil that we get from peanuts, groundnuts, sesame, or mustard seeds or olive oil, so once you consume that, it gets metabolized, and in the presence of this enzyme FADS1 enzyme, which is actually given instruction by this gene, in order to get to convert it into EPA, it's a longer chain fatty acids. And this conversion has to happen if you want to utilize your fatty acids. So what happens is, if you are a poor converter, you don't convert these plant-based sources, the oils which you get from plant-based sources, to EPA and AA. In this case, what happens is, those individuals who are not efficient in converting will actually get benefited from fats which are acquired from animal foods, because it's readily available in EPA. They don't have to go through this conversion step. Whereas the people or like individuals who are A allele carriers or excellent converters, they get benefited from fats acquired from plant-based oil or plant-based sources. So this is how you could actually categorize or make subgroups using using genetic guidelines or using genetic assessment. So eating according to your genes could be more precise and effective. So what I would suggest is A allele carriers are likely to benefit with plant-based fatty acids, whereas C allele carriers are likely to benefit from animal-based fatty acids, because animal sources will have EPA and DHA in by its own. So you don't need this conversion step. So instead of just saying peanut oil is good, or coconut oil is good, or butter is good, or ghee is good, or egg yolks are good, we actually get to know the genetic makeup of a person before suggesting what is good for them. So for some individuals, egg yolks can be good, can be beneficial, whereas for some individuals, oils could be beneficial. There is nothing wrong in consuming coconut oil or butter or egg yolk if you have the capacity or if you are wired with the ability to metabolize them. So this is what the concept of eating according to your genes always conveys. And I think this is more precise and effective rather than giving a biased suggestion or recommendation to individuals. So the past, we've been asking which oil is the best, but going forward, we need to change our question instead of finding solutions to our question. So if you start asking which oil is good for me, and then it changes your overall perception about food. So you don't look any food as a good food or bad food, but you start looking at whether the food is good for me or not. So this is what the transition is happening and will happen in the way forward in the future. So we are moving away from making an assumption that the entire population to have a same requirement to more of gene-based individual dietary advice. I would like to use my time to give one more example. So we are all very familiar, milk is a part of our daily diet, so it's an integral part of Indian diet. But it's a very ironical to see that it's very contrasting evidences that we look at what we are doing and what we're supposed to do. So India is the largest producer of the world, that only 1/3 of our population is tolerant to lactose. I think that's like quite, surprising, shocking, because we are not looking at whether we have the ability to digest milk or not, but we always keep asking whether milk is good or bad, or paneer is good or bad, or whether we need to go with low-fat milk or not. So the first picture here, it shows the global prevalence of lactose intolerance. Here it says the statistics, we are one of the largest producers of milk in the world. And there are various studies which are done in India. And you could see that the red ones are lactose tolerant individuals, like the population who has the ability to tolerate or digest lactose efficiently. Whereas as you go down, so they lose their ability or they lack the ability to digest lactose. So the study which was done also says that South Indians have lower LP, that is lactase persistence frequency, comparatively to North Indians. So it also attributed to the how or the way we evolved. So all of us know that there are two civilizations which happen, the Aryan and the Dravidian roots. We have different routes of migration even in India, and that could also possibly contribute to these differences. So we need to understand what is actually required and how we are feeding our body. So this is what the guideline says, that it is like milk, the servings which are actually given as recommendation, 2 to 3 servings every day. But we actually, fail to look at these differences within India. So we are all different in terms of our requirement. And if you look at how do we actually start changing our dietary recommendations, so first we need to understand all mammals feed on milk, like not on the other mammals' milk, but mammals do feed on milk for till certain time. And we are also same, nothing different from other mammals. So if you look at the lactase enzyme expression, so at the fetus level or in the fetus stage, so it's always like a low expression. So it is expressed at a lower level. And as you move to an infancy or an infant stage, the expression, it's really expressed in larger amounts. So you could say the higher expression is found only during infancy. But for some individuals, it remains the same throughout adulthood. For some individuals, it becomes nil or it declines and they lose their ability to digest milk. And how do we find out whether you still have that capacity or you have actually lost that capacity over the period of years is through genetic testing. There are certain genes, and one such gene is MCM6 gene, and that is why genetic testing becomes a very effective tool for dietitians or any health professional, because it helps you to identify your genetic variation. So if you are an individual who actually you tend to carry forward that tendency, so you can actually drink milk and consume dairy as recommended, as given by the guidelines, 2 to 3 servings. Whereas if you are an individual who will actually come into this category having a low expression, or whom we normally term them as lactase non-persistence, then what happens is that they don't have the expression, so they may not have the ability to digest milk. So we need to differentiate these two groups of individuals and then give recommendations accordingly. So the normal ones are more likely to exhibit lactase persistence, and it's actually a very good source of nourishment for them. Whereas here, if you belong to this category, you may not actually benefit you. It may actually be it might be really harmful. And there are a lot of studies which actually correlates between lactose consumption and metabolic syndrome. So if you keep drinking milk, and if you belong to this category of individuals, and if you keep consuming dairy and dairy products, so then it becomes really harmful for you. So it's high time that we look at these individual differences, and then we go forward giving more specific recommendations. So we all know what should be given for lactose intolerance. So you could either prescribe or suggest lactose alternatives or lactose-free milk, or fermented milk products. There are lactose-free enzymes which could be taken. So there are a lot of solutions for it. One thing is we need to start looking at, are we feeding our genes in the right manner? And is it very appropriate to feed our genes, knowing our genetic makeup and then feeding it appropriately? So next one is coffee. I've taken all these examples because it's very common that we consume all these foods on a daily basis. So it becomes very useful for you if you know about this. So we all know about caffeine. So if a person comes to you and asks whether caffeine is good or bad, so you usually say it's good if you believe that it's actually beneficial. So that's how the green coffee concept came up recently, last 2 years before, and then they were selling green coffee for weight loss. So some believe it's good and some believe it's not good. So it's again a bias. So instead of going with a bias, we can always consider these genetics. So you could actually classify, categorize people based on genetic makeup, and then come up with whether it increases or decreases, or it has null effect on your metabolism. So this is what is happening when you drink coffee. So when you drink coffee, it gets metabolized, and then metabolites are, it reaches the liver where it gets broken down, and the metabolites are excreted through urine. And some individuals, the rate of this breakdown happens very slowly, and we need to really find out through genetic testing whether you actually metabolize coffee in a slow manner or in a very faster way. And thereby, we again categorize people based on their genetic makeup. So if you're a person who is metabolizing caffeine in a slow rate, then we actually tell them to restrict the amount of coffee. Because what happens is, if you're taking a long time to metabolize caffeine, then it stays in the body for a longer time before you take the second cup. So thereby, there is a kind of possibility for accumulation in your body, which again leads to heart ailment. So we can identify people who are slow metabolizers and fast metabolizers using genetic testing. And with this kind of a subgroups based on genetic makeup, we can identify and give specific recommendation or targeted recommendation. So I would like you to see this first graph. So we always think that, or the nutrition research has been looking at linear relationships. So we'll take one particular food and we'll try to prove the food is good or bad for one particular disease outcomes. We always look at a linear relationship. So if you ask, like we have been testing out different dosages of coffee on a particular population, and we say those consuming more than 4 cups per day will be at the highest risk for cardiovascular disease or myocardial infarction. But here it's more evident. You are classifying the population based on the genetic makeup, and still you are testing with the dosage. So here among the AA genotype carriers, even individuals consuming more than 4 cups per day, they are still at having a lesser risk, whereas the AC and the CC genotypes carriers, so if they consume more than 4 cups, they are at a higher risk. So it's not about the number of cups of coffee, but it's more about the type of genetic variation that you carry, which determines whether this dosage or the amount of caffeine is harmful or beneficial. So I think with the FADS1 gene, lactase enzyme, the lactose intolerance gene, and caffeine, you would have understood it's not the food that is food good or bad, but it's up to the individual who is consuming that food and the genetic makeup that he is having that determines the response to a particular food. And as I told you, these are few evidences that we have come up with. That is like they have proven that it gives improved weight management results with the nutrigenetic group based on these genetic markers. So these are some of the evidences that I have just curated. So after the 300 days of follow-up, you could find that the nutrigenetic group has lost weight, as well as when you compare it with the other group, which didn't follow nutrigenetic. And also disclosure of information. So even with disclosing a genetic information can bring in a dietary intake, because it's about the perception of an individual with this genetic testing, because it's more personalized, more individualized test and giving a dietary advice based on the individual's makeup. So there is another Stanford University study which I commonly cite because that was the first breakthrough which happened, which they proved genetically appropriate diets could be used for weight loss. So it's not about the diet which is going wrong or which is correct, but if you identify individuals who will benefit with any kind of diet and then prescribe that particular diet, it's going to work, it's going to be more effective. So you can't say Ornish diet is bad or good, but Ornish diet could be good for some individuals. See, if you're giving a genetically appropriate diet, if you're finding out individuals carrying variations who will be benefited with the Ornish diet, so you could bring in 14.1% weight loss, again 3.1% weight loss for a general population based diet. So no diet is good or bad, or it's right or wrong. It's about the individual who is consuming the diet and for how long he is consuming it, which determines the health or disease outcome. So coming on to the commercial aspect. So what happens? How do we actually determine what kind of a genetic makeup or what genetic variation I carry? So these are the sample processing. So we collect the sample, we collect your DNA with your saliva or blood, or it could be with cheek swab. It's sent to the lab, and this is all happening at an e-commerce platform. You don't have to walk in any lab. So it is all done online. And the next step is once it reaches the lab, they extract the DNA out of the sample that you have given, and they do something called as SNP genotyping, where they find out the sequence. I told you it was all based on this. So they find out the SNP is related to each nutrient, and then they give you a report just similar to your blood report, and nutritionist will be counseling post that result interpretation. So this is what is happening. You can collect the DNA from cheek swab, saliva, or blood. Then it is extracted. And then we started using mostly NGS, which is next generation sequencing, and you get a report in a very readable format that is easy to understand and use. So again, with this example, I want to distinguish how personalized nutrition looks like. So here is, we all know about folate pathways. So if someone comes to you with a blood report saying he is folate deficient, vitamin B9 deficiency, so we give vitamin B9 rich food sources. That is the most common strategy that is followed. But learning about nutrigenetics enable you to understand what is happening at a molecular level and how do we really go about with very targeted nutritional recommendations. Once you understand the entire metabolic pathway, so you can actually come up with very specific recommendation based on their genetic makeup. So you can categorize people based on the genetics and give recommendations. So instead of just telling them eat vitamin B9 food, so now most of the pregnant women who walks inside a clinic is given the same dosage of supplementation regardless of their health status. I mean, in the sense, like mostly if they are healthy pregnant, so they get the same dosage of folate supplements regardless of their genetic makeup. But if you understand the molecular pathway of folate metabolism, so it's always, there are genetic variation which actually differentiates your folate requirement. So for one example, I would say is the MTHFR gene is the most widely studied gene, and it's a methylation, like methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase gene. So what happens is that people carrying certain types of genetic variation of this particular gene are not effective in converting homocysteine to methionine. In that case, what happens is your homocysteine level goes up and they're at a high risk for cardiovascular ailments. And why or what is happening is this MTHFR gene, so it fails to convert this 5-10 methylene tetrahydrofolate to 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. If you carry a particular type of gene, then even if you keep giving folate supplements, it doesn't help. In this case, actually supplementation with 5-methyl folate will help those individuals rather than just giving folate as such. And methionine restrictions will help because homocysteine has methionine has a tendency to recycle back to homocysteine. So if you restrict or go like a vegetarian diet, so that would really help. And vitamin B12, B6 rich foods, because we all know B complex vitamins are involved in the folate pathway, and in addition, betaine and cysteine rich foods. So instead of just focusing at folate and folate rich food sources, so we started to get in depth at a molecular level and start personalizing or giving specific targeted nutrition, to these individuals who are with different genetic variations. So this is what the difference between genetic nutrition and genetic nutrition looks like. And so far we have been looking at phenotype, but it's time to start correlating genotype and phenotype relationship. So when I mention about phenotype, we are going and doing assessment based on blood test, signs and symptoms, and we take a dietary recall. So with respect to vitamin B9, if you look at, so probably you will be doing a serum homocysteine level test or vitamin B9, and you will be asking that particular individual whether you have fatigue, dizziness, mouth sores, all that. Like you go with a symptomatic assessment. And you also take a dietary recall to know certain information about the dietary pattern. But now it's time to include genetic markers that are associated with this disease outcome or health outcome, so that it becomes very comprehensive. And this is what we have been missing so far. And I think now we have the tools and technology available to get this information. What are all the genes which are associated with which nutrients, and how it causes a differential response. So this is what we are trying to do through nutrigenetics. So ABCDs of dietary assessment is what nutritionist follows. It's high time that we start including genetic information. So each biomarker or genetic marker will be associated with a trait, and we need to find out and start correlating it. So this is how few of the snapshots of genetic report looks like if you haven't seen anything. And so what I would say is it's time to move forward. So we have been doing population-based dietary approach, and we have slowly started to personalize it. And going forward, it's the space, or it will be a future of precision nutrition. So if you want to write to me, feel free to write to me. And this is our website, and we also offer courses, so you can also join that. And moment to appreciate what Stan and his team at Welocity is doing. So they're really doing a great job of engaging people in a very informative and in a productive manner. And thanks for the opportunity, Stan. It was really nice to share this occasion and to share knowledge with you. And I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Janani. I think it's been fantastic. It's comprehensive. Once again, I'll just stop your screen sharing. Okay, so if you could put the video on so that we all can see you. So जो हिंदी स्पीकिंग लोग हैं उनके बेनिफिट के लिए मैं ये बताऊं कि हम लोग कई बार ये देखते हैं, ये सोचते हैं कि दिस ये कॉफी मेरे लिए अच्छा है या नहीं है, या व्हीट या ब्रेड वगैरह मेरे लिए अच्छा है नहीं है. सो वी ऑलवेज थिंक कि हम लोग कभी ये सोचते हैं ये खाना मेरे लिए अच्छा है कि नहीं है. बट देन व्हाट वी रियली नीड टू बी लुकिंग एट इज not whether this a particular food is good for you or food is good or not, but is that particular food is good for you or not. So for that you need to be doing a genetic testing. आपको genetic testing करना पड़ेगा, and this is exactly what Janani madam ने हमको बता दिया. So first of all, Janani ma'am, thank you so much on behalf of everybody. I'm sure a lot of followers, your students are also here, so they've been very keen to listen to you in this platform. So thank you so much for sharing that wonderful information. And now there's a little time for some question and answers. So I can read out the questions for you. And then, we can, you probably could choose to answer that, Janani ma'am. Yeah. Can you please tell us about the technology used in genetic testing?
Genetic testing for nutrition?
The DNA testing. Generally, I mean, we can probably talk about PCR and then NGS and all this.
Okay, I'm not a genetics expert, but because I was in the industry for a while, I can share my inputs. Basically, there are different, we also evolved a lot from the genetic testing point of view. So initially Sanger sequencing was used, and it took a very long time, and it was a bit expensive as well. So initially we had only few markers that were related or associated, that was proven to be associated with nutritional response, and that too with Caucasian population and other population. And when we started this, formulating genetic reports, I think we had only 50 markers, and it was more like a PCR, and it went on through different sequencing methods earlier. And now they slowly started to find out, different genes. Like there are many genes. I would say even 500 plus 1,000 genes. We could find association between those genes and nutrients. So the technology also have become really I would say improved technology, where you just focus on very few genetic markers with over many genetic markers. If you go in for the exome sequencing, which is the most recent one, so you could actually do the entire genome. And I think there are some companies which have upgraded to exome sequencing, but initially there were different NGS methods used. So it depends on the company as well as the lab that they give the test to. But what I would suggest is it should be relevant, and the number of markers tested using any technology, because I'm not from that background, I'm not the right person to explain about the technology part, but a few technology that I know that I've come across over the years. So it used to be Sanger sequencing initially, and then we went on to a different NGS. And now we are using exome sequencing, where it gives you an opportunity to scale it up to, the number of markers getting more and more. And there is also whole genome sequencing, where you could process the entire, genome, which is quite expensive, which is not commercially used, but still, there is an option for you to test your whole genome if you're willing to. But for the nutrition aspect, which I'm dealing with, I think the validity of the test comes into play with a number of markers as well as the number of traits that are tested. So you could have only one marker which is tested. For example, I could take a test for 900 rupees. And I could say that I have personalized the diet. But I could test for more than 1,000+ markers, and then like I could personalize the diet. So this is like the real difference that we want to look at.
Yeah.
So the term personalization is really vast, but we want to make it really valid. And at least if not like 1,000+, we want to give like reasonable numbers for our clients, like who actually trust us. And like the credibility plays an important role for health professionals. So whatever technologies they use, I think when it comes to validity of those tests, so it's the number of markers should be actually decided. And second one is the research evidences, whether they are pertaining, whether they are relevant to the population that you're testing for. Are you taking information from other population and using it? So that is, again, is like, more important, because like I'm not really good at the genetics or the technology, but whatever I knew, I just shared now.
Yeah, from a nutrigenomics perspective, we cannot really talk probably about the technology involved in the lab in terms of the machines and everything. It's again a vast field. So there are various technologies, as you rightly said, from Sangers and the PCR. Then you have, next generation sequencing, and then we also have this whole exome sequencing right now. So now there are a couple of other questions that have been asked, so I would want you to answer them as well. Doctors, do you feel the dietary guidelines which we get every year is of no use in clinical practice? I mean, there are a lot of dietary guidelines that we get from so do you think they don't really come into the picture when we talk about personalization of the dietetics?
I think no one can actually do this in, as a person, when it comes to interdisciplinary science like nutritional genomics. So if doctor wants to, practice this, I think like he can have a dietitian or like a nutritional genomic counselor in his team, and he can contribute from his side, from the medical side, and a person who is equipped with the knowledge about nutritional genomic can add on to it. I think that's the best practice. So we need to change our mindset, like one individual giving diet plans rather than having a team of members. And that's how genetic testing company works. So I think like even in your team, you have people from different expertise to make a final product. It's not just one person giving a diet. So there's a lot of efforts from various disciplines. I think moving forward, that's the way. And I think there is no restrictions for anybody to come into this picture. But I think a person who is well educated and equipped with this knowledge has to be like really in the forefront, who will be at translating this science to the common public. So though, I mean, it could be a practitioner, or it could be a nutritionist, or it could be a geneticist, but a person who is explaining should have the knowledge and should be trained on this. Because I've seen there are companies who makes use of geneticists to do the nutritional testing, nutrigenetic test report counseling. And there are companies who has nutritionists. So it has to be interdisciplinary. It has to have different expertise. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, so I think it's common. I mean, knowledge on genetics as well as nutrition is the right way ahead, because only a medical doctor may not be able to make use of nutrition in his practice. So he needs to have someone who understands genetic reports. He or she can read, and then also recommend the dietary recommendations for that particular person. Okay, now can nutrigenomics be beneficial for prevention or to cure PCOS in adolescent girls? Can you please give me your views on this topic using nutrition?
See, that's what I told you. There is no particular reason for this personalization to happen. So it need not be only for prevention, but the key outcome or the objective of nutritional genomics is more for preventive nutrition. But it could be used for treating disease, and it could be for any disease, not only for PCOS. It could be for any disease, but unless and until we have evidences, particularly in Indian population, if we have tried and tested out and found out the association of certain genetic markers, then it becomes more important to find out the association of different markers, and then we can treat any disease.
Yeah, so there is a similar question. What are the basic things to study before diet planning is done based on the gene assessment? So I think, as you rightly mentioned, so you need to have adequate information about that particular, person's genetic variations, and along with that, what are the foods that have been proven to be beneficial for that kind of a condition? Is that correct?
Sorry, come again.
The basic thing, what are the basic information a person should have, a dietitian should have, to plan the gene based diet? That's the question.
Okay.
I think you answered almost.
Right. So do you want me to repeat that now?
No, I don't want you to. So now the next question is how to break the weight loss plateau. All genetic diet follows well. Well, I think what's been asked is that, well, I don't really understand that question correctly. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. Genetic test, the homocysteine levels are moderate. Vitamin A is at high risk. Vitamin B6 and B12 are moderate. So she gets small giddiness attacks. So please suggest.
You mean to say vitamin homocysteine levels are normal, moderate?
Yeah, they're moderate, yeah.
Okay, and what about the other vitamins you mentioned?
Vitamin A is at high risk. Vitamin B6 and B12 is moderate. So the symptoms are giddiness attacks. That's bicyclic migraine.
Okay, so is that like what test to be taken, or what is the question?
Yeah,
so
I mean, the question is what to suggest. So I think, what's a remedy? What's a solution for this? But again, yeah, it's a very specific question. So I think unless and until we see really the report and get a lot of other lifestyle related information, probably it will be very generic to answer that.
Right. So see, one thing is like if you want to find out solution, you need to be aware about like what are the genetic markers associated with each nutrient. So for example, you spoke about vitamin A being a high risk for vitamin A. So you need to be aware like what are the genetic polymorphism associated with vitamin A. For example, it's BCMO1, that's beta carotene monoxidase. So then if you know about it, then you will come to know like how to design that. So for example, if you carry a particular variation in that BCMO1, so you may not be able to actually convert carotene to retinol. In that case, supplementing with carotene rich foods actually doesn't make any big difference in the individual. So it's time to learn about the science, and then if you start practicing, I think like you can make a real big difference.
Yeah. Okay. So now there's another very interesting question. Is that is it possible to develop changes in genes over time? For example, many persons develop sensitivity or dislikes for certain food over time. Is it related to the changes in the genes?
Of course, you can't neglect that fact that there is another aspect of genes and food that I didn't mention because we didn't that doesn't come under the scope of today's session, is epigenetics, where like your environment has effects on your genetic material. So there is a tendency for how your genes are expressed. So that might change over a period of time. Not exactly the SNP will remain the same throughout the lifetime till our death, but how the genes are expressed will change. And of course, certain tolerances could be like minimized, or it could go beyond the limit. Allergies could worsen, or it could become better over a period of time. For example, if you come to know that you have dust allergy, and if you isolate yourself from dust, or if you just like what we are doing in quarantine, so you know a particular thing and you avoid it, then you're not getting it. It's similar. So over a period of time, you could also develop immunity. Your answer to your question is yes. Over a period of time, your gene expression could be changed with the help of the diet or the food that you're consuming. But the SNPs, but what we are talking is a different aspect of genetics. Like nutrigenetics is something, SNPs, where I said your adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, the arrangement will always be the same, regardless of whatever you're eating. but the outcome based on the variation, the phenotype will change over a period of time. So for example, if I'm giving a gene-based diet, so if I'm consuming foods appropriate to our genetic makeup, what happens is that maybe I'll be able to maintain my weight, or I'll be able to lose weight over a period of time. But the arrangement will be the same. So if you're giving for a genetic test today, and if you're taking the same test after 20 years, you should get the same results. So that's what nutrigenetic or the SNP genotyping is all about. But when it comes to gene expression, the way your genes are expressed, how it functions could differ. And that is what epigenetics talks about. So it's the answer to your question is yes. So it will change over a period of time.
Yeah, so there have been a few more questions that have been asked by different participants, but I'm afraid we don't really have much time to answer all of them.
I've also shared my email if you're really...
Yeah, so if any one of you would like to, get back to us, you can definitely get back. We can pass on these questions to Janani ma'am as well. And so, once again, thank you, Janani, for sharing a lot more scientific, technical knowledge. Of course, for for a layman like us, it may be a little difficult to understand to begin with, but yes, ये नया science है, develop हो रहा है, and there will be a lot more awareness. For example, during the lockdown, we learned a lot about the virus and a lot of new terminologies like quarantine and social distancing and isolations and whatnot. बहुत सारी चीजों को हम लोगों ने सीखा है. So nutrigenomics also is a new science that is now being developing, because more and more people are now understanding that your genes play a vital role in your food intake. So thank you so much for sharing that information, Janani. And for the benefit of everybody, let me also tell you that a couple of announcements. One is that if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, you can just go to YouTube and subscribe to Welocity Genetics. You'll get a lot more webinars that we have done in the recent past. And we also can you can also see a lot of videos about the work that we do as nutrigenomics company across India. So go to YouTube and type and search for Welocity Genetics. Secondly, we have a small accreditation program. Now, accreditation program is like a kind of a certification program that's been organized by Welocity Life Sciences, Welocity Genetics. Now we have a lot of speakers who will be speaking, and we are covering the topics like what's human genetics, what is nutrigenomics, what is the fundamental of human genetics, and also we have Welocity Genetics program. That's a 1-year program that covers around 105 different phenotypes and across around 18 different categories, including weight management, nutritional deficiencies, a lot of symptoms that we all get in terms of chronic diseases. That includes like your weight management, diabetes, obesity, of course, cardiovascular diseases, kidney health, eye health, respiratory related issues, male and female fertility related issues, etc. So there's a comprehensive list. So we'd like to talk about each phenotype and what does it do. So there is this program of 2 days. It's on Friday and Saturday from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. So you can go to our website, myvelocity.com, and register yourself if you have not done it. So tomorrow is the last day. The program is going to happen on Friday and Saturday. Friday 4 hours and Saturday 4 hours, to 10 to 2 o'clock. Now, for the Welocity IBOs, let me tell you that the weekly closing, 159th weekly closing, is going to happen at 11:59 tonight. And you can log in your sales if you have not done that. And you can earn your weekly commissions on Friday. And we have already started dispatching our products and services across India. So we have completed dispatching. Of course, the local people have got it. And the outstation people are going to get it, because, of course, it's not as efficient as it used to be generally. But it definitely will be reaching within a reasonable time. You will be given the docket numbers, so आप docket number को online में track करके पता कर सकते हैं. So with this, we come to the end of this webinar. So it's been wonderful to have all of you. We've been in large numbers, thanks to Janani madam as well, and all our IBOs. हम लोगों ने definitely आज कुछ नया सीखा है कि न्यूट्रीजेनोमिक्स के बारे में बहुत ज्यादा साइंस है, लॉट ऑफ टेक्निकल चीजें हैं. सिंपल एक सेंटेंस में अगर बता देंगे तो जो भी हम लोग खाना खाते हैं वो हमारे जीन्स के लिए सूटेबल होता है या नहीं होता है, ये पता करने के लिए अभी जेनेटिक टेस्ट हैं। वो जेनेटिक टेस्ट करने के बाद में आप अपना जीन्स के हिसाब से खाएंगे तो आपको जो न्यूट्रिएंट्स की जरूरत है वो ही आपको खाने की रिकमेंडेशंस हमारे काउंसलर काउंसलर्स वो रिकमेंडेशन देते हैं थ्रू एन एक्शन प्लान. And of course, there has been a lot of feedback that we're getting for what they understood from this. So yes, you can also, before you leave a note of what you learned and what appreciation for Janani ma'am and for the efforts that we are doing as well. So thank you very much. Tomorrow we're going to talk about a very, very interesting topic, and it's going to be about personal branding. तो हमको अगर बिजनेस करना है, प्रोफेशनल में रहना है, कुछ भी करना है, तो we need to develop our own brand, personal branding. We talk about different brands of products and different brands of different things, but how about your own personal branding? ये बहुत जरूरत है. So we got a different unique topic tomorrow and a unique speaker, a powerful speaker from Bangalore. So she's going to be with us. So wait for that update tomorrow. We'll be sending you the broadcasting the details for logging in. So till then, take care of yourself. Have a nice dinner. Sleep well. Wake up early. Have some exercise. Have a very, very productive day tomorrow as well. So for the 44th webinar tomorrow, we're going to meet at 8 o'clock in the evening. So till then, take care. Good night. Shubh Ratri.